Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed, pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Before we get started with today's podcast, I just wanted to let you know I've got a minor audio issue through this episode that will pop in and out. We did our best to edit it out, but we found we couldn't, and we didn't want to let go of this conversation. So here it is in all its imperfect glory. Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is Parenting in Connection When Your Child is the Bully, which comes after a listener's response to one of our podcasts. So, Bridgie, would you like to read the beautiful message we received?
I will. So this listener says, "Good morning. I have just finished your podcast, We Can Lead With Our Hurt or We Can Lead With Our Heart, and it spoke to me deeply. I'm still processing and I'm not quite finding the words to express exactly how I'm feeling. All I can say is thank you. Your stories about your sons and the experiences with bullying and friendship dynamics is what I needed to hear. It is something I am navigating with my son at the moment, and I'm finding it incredibly challenging on how to best lead him. When he is with a friend who he just adores, they both exclude this other boy who wants to join in. I have witnessed it, and they both do it in a teasing and disrespectful manner. My son says he just wants to play with his friend, and the other boy keeps following them. I support his choice to play with whoever he wants, but I feel like I am in uncharted waters on teaching him how to express this respectfully, because I am naturally a people pleaser, and my son is definitely not my greatest teacher. The other boy's parent has come and spoken to me about the dynamic and that his son felt upset to come to school because of my son. I wanted to ask a bit more on how you discussed leadership with your sons. I would love it to be that my son can respectfully say his boundaries. I guess what I'm asking is if you have previously done a podcast on how to deal with kids' friendship dynamics. I light up every time I hear you discuss your relationship and techniques you practice, in particular with your sons. Thank you for your words of wisdom. Kim.
I just adore it when we receive listener feedback and when they ask us for further insight or to discuss a question, because it just feels so wonderful, doesn't it, to know that we've got this relationship and sense of backwards and forwards communication.
Yeah.
And the podcast normally we just put out in the world and we never know.
That's right, and we kind of just go by our own experience, and then we can have this feedback. It's like, oh yeah, we can go deeper there because we do have stories that, you know, and insights and perspectives to share. So yeah, keep those questions and comments coming in for us, because they certainly help with us creating more podcast content.
Yeah, 100%. Please reach out to us with anything and everything. So this is a big topic. So we just first want to say everything in dynamic with our children and with our lives, we come from the standpoint of is a dynamic that has healing potential and is co-created by everyone involved. No one dynamic is created by any one person in the world where we can take that slightly further step back from it's you and it's me into what's the dynamic, what's the service, what's the function, what's the co-creation here. When we take a slightly bigger view, we can remove ourselves from the concept of guilt and shame and blame, because we're looking at it from the perspective of what is everybody gaining, learning, and trying to process or heal in this dynamic. And I don't know about you, Bridge, but just being able to do that really lets me build a sense of compassion in my own body, rather than a more volatile emotional state of shame or guilt or blame, or like the ego sense of self that's often has that volatile emotionality to it. Just relaxing back and a little bit bigger allows me to really be able to process at a level that I feel still allows me to be connected to myself and my child, particularly when they're the ones that are not cast in a beautiful light.
Yeah, it's big, you know, and like it's big work, right? It's a practice doing that, because what it's essentially asking us to do is to own which part of us is participating in this, and it not simply be something outside of us that we're just witnessing or observing. It's like, okay, how can I lean into this? What's here for me? What's my self-responsibility? What's this asking me to expand into and be curious about, rather than come down upon with my idealisms or rules or justifications or dismissals?
Yeah, right. Because the problem that we see with any style of parenting is, for us, the dynamic is never as simple as what we do to them, what we do to our kids, what we teach our kids. It's always, hang on a minute, let me just bring that light back towards myself. What does this ask me to rise into? Where is my discomfort? Where is my growth that's reflected here? What is it that I need to raise in myself so that I'm free enough from attachments, meaning emotional connection or emotional volatility, to be able to be in this space of loving them and leading them through something that's a little bit greater than the bounce of what's happening in this moment. So I love that you kind of went there, because what I loved with this listener said, I want him to be able to respectfully say his boundaries. And instantly my brain went, oh man, that is still one of the hardest things I see most adult grown women struggle with.
Yeah.
So I wonder how this listener is with being able to respectfully say her own boundaries. Respectfully say her own boundaries to her mother, to her father, to her friends, to her government, to her children, to her partner. How are you with being able to actually, in a regulated way, hold yourself and your sovereignty at the same time as respectfully communicating, that's a no, here's how you can love me better? Because that is actually an incredibly complex and advanced practice.
Yeah.
And I see most adult women struggle with it.
Yeah. It's really big, because if you think about it, none of us were parented in a way that was encouraged. We were likely institutionalized in such a way to be nice, to be kind, to be gentle, to be agreeable. And so we are asking ourselves to unwind decades of conditioning, and also to put ourselves in, from a survival, nervous system wiring point of view, in a terrifying position, which is that our programming says, if you do that, you might not get love. So there's the conscious part of ourselves that knows we want to get to that point, but the programmed, imprinted part of ourselves that says, no, that's not safe. I will just people please, which this listener's explained she's a people pleaser. I will people please and acquiesce to those outside of me in order to keep the peace or remain comfortable or stay safe. Now, this is our human nature. This is ultimately what every government, marketer, advertiser, propagandist,
utilizes
and capitalizes on, right? This is, and our work is dismantling that. We will never get it all done, but we will get it done where it's most inspiring and meaningful to us. And so for this listener, and perhaps for others listening, in your parenting and in how you raise your child to do that, it is inspiring for you.
Yeah.
And so part of it is cultivating, first of all, the courage to be disliked.
Yeah.
Right?
How hard is that?
Huge. And being willing to be rejected.
How hard is that?
Yeah, right? Not saying it's easy.
I'll just echo everything you say with, how hard is that? Keep going.
And potentially being alone in and misunderstood in what you're, and and potentially being perceived to be making a mountain out of a molehill. Because what's the big deal? Go with it.
Yeah, being perceived to be wrong too much, which results again in isolation and separation. And we are beings that require or seek belonging. Yeah, definitely. So when this listener is saying, I really want my son to be able to do these things, we will always say, I hear that. And gosh, yes, we would love that for our children too. But the work first has to start with us, because if we consider that our children are the expression of our own repressions, the degree to which you avoid speaking your boundaries out loud in a regulated way will be the degree to which he is over exacerbating those. So meanness and exclusion is a form of reclaiming boundaries, but it's not a regulated or embodied form. It comes in still, I'm uncomfortable, I don't know how to be in this space, so I'll kind of avoid the feeling and the tension that exists from holding a loving boundary, because that requires intimacy. And being mean, just kind of like anger, allows me to kind of bypass the pain and the awkwardness and the anxiety into something that feels more powerful. So when I see that mean behavior, I'm automatically going, wow, you're really avoiding something here that's really hard for you to be with. And so I see that as, you need some social skills here. You need some help because you don't know how to hold yourself in this space. And baby, I get it.
Yeah, and be with that tension. And for us as parents, we have to dive into being in that tension with them. Yeah. Because the moment it becomes too uncomfortable for us to be in with them, we will leave. And then they've left because we're no longer holding them in that space. And so the beautiful practice is like looking, as Julie's suggesting, looking at, okay, well, where am I struggling to do that? And what's one way today where I can ask myself to lean into that tension point and hold the boundary respectfully without attachment to how that person might receive it.
There's the degree to which you reclaim it. Yeah, no, you can't control it. All you are ever responsible for is your own integrity or lack of. So to be able to lean into that and reclaim that space for yourself will mean that your children will automatically, that dynamic will shift, because either they won't need the exacerbated experience in which to bring it to your surface and them trying to learn it because they're not having a pathway to easily follow. So they're kind of forging it and trying to work it out in a messy sort of way. So the more you reclaim it in you, the less this painful dynamic will exist. And the more that child automatically has the skill set, because it's almost like an automatic download when they witness it in you. That's just part of the soup.
And it's the imprint ultimately, because it's what we do, not what we say. It's what we live, not what we preach.
Totally. Amen to that. Yeah. So I would really work on, I have been trying to think about times I've been in variants of those situations with my own son, which I know really spoke to this listener when we were talking about our own personal experiences. And I first off have to remind myself that meanness is a way of finding power. So I automatically ask myself, it's counterbalancing a state of disempowerment. Yeah. So where are you feeling disempowered and like you don't have choice and you're not able to navigate your own life? So where can I perhaps see or ask you or be involved in that conversation around, where is that really hard? Where are you being told at the moment? How can I hand over some more reins to you? Because that is really important, that in our parenting, we're handing over that control to them. We're leading from the place of, here's best practice for looking after yourself, your body, your psyche, your spirituality, blah, blah, blah. But then we have to hand those reins over, and now you know, now you decide, and you play and you discover. So I often find we hit these bumpy bits when I'm called to hand over.
Yeah, I love that reflection. Because if you're holding too much or controlling too much, the natural inclination is the resistance in the child and the pushback in the child. So is it actually, you've got to get to the problem, be like, but if the problem, which is actually, okay, there's a power imbalance here. There's a need for autonomy that I am not honoring. So how can I help them feel back in connection? And, and for younger children, perhaps in the form that they want the control, they can't have that control, right? Because it might be to do with safety or to do with the rest of the family's needs. And so we give a simulation of power through power reversal games. And from that place, there then may be an opportunity to have the conversation or set up, a more respectful dynamic for them to carry themselves in, because they're not clawing at the need for power because they've got a felt sense of it again.
Yeah, totally. And where you can, handing over power. So I always kind of thinking front of mind, how can I offer choice?
Yeah.
In as many situations as I can, rather than it's this, or it's my way or the highway. Here's two choices, which would you like? Here's where we're going, here's two places, which would you like handing over that choice. I loved when we were chatting before the podcast, Bridgie, and you were talking about a yes day, and it reminded me of all the yes days I've intentionally created with my kids over the years. And I was like, oh God, I haven't done that.
Yeah.
It's been 2 years in bloody lockdown. Like,
out of practice.
Right.
And like that's a good cup filling thing, right? Like, because if we have the yes days in place, if we have the preemptive conversations around power and choice, then potentially the need for power doesn't play out in friendship dynamics, because there's not this sense. Because remember that children come to school and they'll play out what's unresolved in the home as well. So you've got all these children, particularly in like lockdowns and like intense stuff that's been going on for a lot of people in the world at the moment. You've got all these dysregulated children coming together, trying to set all their other kids up to feel what it feels like to be them. So I would also look at, how is it meaningful for that child in the family, that child who's perceiving to be bullied or be left out, and that mother who's got her story that she's bringing to you. It will be purposeful for him to be in that role and for her to be feeling the pain of that, for her dynamic, just like it is in some way purposeful for you in your dynamic to be in the role that you're, to be observing and living through the role that your son's cast in. Because children are trying to make sense of their family dynamic, and they will play through that in the schoolyard. I'm sure ask any teacher who has a awareness of these things what children bring, particularly in early childhood. They see it without a doubt, and I'm sure it happens in primary as well. And so I would also, like, if you're feeling guilt towards the other mother, also kind of like expand a little wider and ask, how could it also be purposeful for them, not as a way to absolve yourself of responsibility of leaning in and equipping your child with the social skills, but to disentangle from the sense of like needing to owe her something or needing to be performative in some way to absolve yourself of the discomfort of guilt.
Yeah, that's super powerful.
Because guilt's just a cyclic feeling that where we kind of get into it, so we're trying to do all these things in our head that we believe is just enough to get us out of the feeling of guilt again. And then when something else happens and we're back there, and it's just this like hamster on a wheel of like just doing enough to be out of the guilt, which is just, guilt is internalized social programming, largely. Sometimes it's there to help us get back into our own integrity. But when it's looking outside of ourselves all the time, it's not us. It's what we've internalized that we think needs to be us. And you can't be powerful there.
No, you can't.
If you are, it's not connected to yourself. It's somehow, looking for approval outside of you.
Yeah.
just briefly interrupting this week's podcast to let you know that if you would love to have a deeper, more connected lead up to Christmas full of humanitarian spirit and giving energy with your children, we would love to invite you to download our free Kids Kindness Advent calendar. It is something that has brought so much joy and fun and connection to our families the last couple of years, and we're handing it over to you to make it your own. So head to nourishingthemother.com.au or just check out our links on socials. So head there to get your free Kids Kindness Advent calendar.
So bringing it back to this child, if that were my child, and funnily enough, I think threesomes are often an experience of school. I think both my eldest kids, actually even my third has, well, actually all of my kids have found themselves in relationships that involve dynamics of three. And I do find that enormously fascinating for one, but it always means that there's some level of conflict or potentially choice, whether you're following the game or whether you're leaving the group, or like there's always a level of social tension when you have a group of three, right? Because
it's like a third wheel, like kind of it.
Yeah, so I find that enormously interesting, and I think that that's enormously powerful and purposeful. I guess where I would go with it, if that were me, is I would be having the conversations at home with my child, trying to hone around on what's the anxiety and the discomfort, what comes up when this other child comes near you, what's happening in your body. And when you do that thing where you're mean or you walk away or run away or whatever, what is actually happening? Where are you? Are you in your body or are you somewhere else? Like seeing if we can get really present and kind of just dig around from a body-centric perspective, so that my child can gain the awareness of when they're regulated and in their body, and when they've gone into some sort of, this is a fight mode, some sort of flooding that's like, I'm now in a reaction, I'm not making a choice that's authentic to me. And that, not that, I mean, super little kids are of course not going to get this in one foul swoop, but it's never the one conversation. It's the continuous massaging and reminding of what integrity looks like and sounds like, and what integrity feels like, and what alignment feels like, and what it doesn't, because that's the lesson that serves you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So I have those conversations around what's happening in your body, and we dig around and we just bring awareness to it. That's all this conversation is let's bring awareness. Can you notice when you're in your body? I would go to my child's teacher or kinder teacher, and I would be asking them for their advice, just to say, this is a dynamic I can see playing out. What do you know about it? What have you seen? What advice would you give? I want to work collaboratively with the school so that we're on the same page at home as the school is in school, and that we're all actually on the same team. So how do we work together to best support this child? Because often the bully is also suffering from some type of social discharge and dynamic as well. Sometimes I've noticed the bully or the perceived bully is being bullied. So there's so many different options if we go beyond behaviour into how do we best support this child, and how do we best work with home and school for the best possible outcomes to support my child so that they have the best possible choices. They're not good or bad. They have the best possible chance, the best possible choices.
And it makes sense to do that too, because ultimately, because we all see it from our own unique perspective, having the insight from the teacher and from what they witness in the dynamic can give you more pieces of information in which to know how to approach it, rather than just approaching it from the lens through which you see it. So that can be really helpful.
Yeah, really helpful. So I'm definitely doing the body work. Notice when you're in your body and in alignment and integrity. Notice when you're not. And then I'd be conversations with school, getting on the same team and page. And then I'd be having conversations with my child. And I would be talking around one of our fundamental values as a family is respect. Respect for self, respect for others. That doesn't mean you do what someone else wants. But there's a way to communicate that feels really good for everyone. and is respectful. And there's a way to communicate that, which leads you into feeling bad right now or feeling bad later. The pain doesn't leave.
Yeah. To help them edge closer to feeling the pain now so they can be free from that ultimately, right? Like kind of move toward the scary thing and excavate around it and find a way out of it rather than it kind of being this big thing that you just continually avoid.
Yeah, yeah. So if this were, we've done this in kindergarten this year. So my 4-year-old this year has had that issue with a person at kinder following her and she not knowing how to handle that and what to do with it. And I adored the way that the kinder teachers supported that. It was just magnificent and put into perspective and included awareness of neurodiversity. And how to empower my child who was actually socially not empowered enough to stand her ground in that moment. She didn't actually have the social literacy. And that was all she was learning. And so there's this wonderful human in there who's teaching her social literacy. And so I never looked at her as the victim or, oh my God, she's either going to act out or she's the victim and they're the only options. I had the conversations with the teacher saying, I've noticed this dynamic. I don't know exactly how to facilitate this. And they were like, no one gets to feel unsafe. But the way that we teach that is we get to create personal boundary first. So that's when we say we put our hand out just flat like a stop sign. And we're like, this is my space, like this is my dance space. So no, which just gives them enough personal space and also time to process how do they want to be in the next moment. What are the choices they actually want to make in the next moment? It just gives them breathing room. So I loved that idea of they were just working with my child around put your hand out to no, I don't want to do that right now, or no, you don't get to touch me, or whatever the thing is right now. No, I don't want to do that right now. But I want to go on the swings. Do you want to come? I want to play with my other friend right now. I could play Play-Doh with you later. Like whatever it is, just going, not this, not now. Here's what I want, but I'll meet you later. We'll do this later, or I just don't want to right now. So that there's versions of how to handle that. Sometimes I just think they need to know what their options are.
Yeah.
But choice is power, right? And unless they know they have choices, how can they know them, right? Unless you know them.
Yeah, that's right.
So I love the idea of creating personal boundary first, which is just that sense of space. Okay, I'm just taking a breath. No, I don't want to do that right now. Sometimes, depending on whether that person's a space invader or not, maybe that's going to be more aggressive instead with more power. But if that person's just going, I want to play with you, just being really clear on, I don't right now. I want to be alone. Or I don't want to play that right now. I want to do colouring. I don't want to play that right now. I want to go and be with my one friend. And there's a space for that to be beautiful and kind and loving rather than a power play because we're masking over anxiety or just are seeking an outlet for power because we feel powerless in other versions of our life.
Yeah. That's so deep.
How do you handle it with your son?
Oh, I love all that. I've just been sitting here nodding away, going, yes. Because I think it's true. It's ultimately because that reaction's happening because they don't see another way. Like, I don't have a toolkit for dealing with this any other way than just wanting them to go away. So I'll just, put up a big wall or I'll ignore them and hope that they leave. But neither of those things are really constructive to clear communication. That child can understand it because that child's then just kind of going, well, maybe if I go this way or follow them that way, or maybe if I ask again, because it doesn't sound like, your son is being super clear or his friend are being super clear. So then there's this other child continuing to try to find a way. But being clear is kind if it's done in a way that's respectful.
Yeah.
And so it might simply be talking to your son about, in what ways could you explain to this other boy that you don't want to play right now? Like, let's just hash out some different ways. Like, what do you think? And give him a chance to think over what they could be. Because kids have great ideas if we give them enough time and space. to mull over them and to think over them and to prioritize them, because he's probably not prioritizing that because he's prioritizing his play and he's prioritizing the friend he wants to be in connection with, and he's probably taking his lead a little too. But just by having a conversation and orienting back to that little juncture, you know, where this little sense of conflict is being perceived by the other child, your child can then go, okay, all right, what could I do here different, and let their brain tick over with ideas. And if he's struggling, then you can help and offer some of the suggestions like what Julie said. But I do think putting the child in the place of coming up with ideas is empowering for them, because if it's self-generated as an idea, they're more likely to draw on it too, because they've thought of how they could do it.
That's such a beautiful reminder. Yeah. So powerful to actually ask them what ideas they have before they own. Yeah, I love it.
I mean, I think it depends on the age, but I mean, I think at any age, we can still ask them what they think and what might be a way that they could approach it. And then if they're struggling, then we can help.
Yeah. Yeah. I love those ideas. Yeah. So what we would love for you to consider is, what is it for you to have the courage to be disliked? What is it for you around being with the pain of rejection or being perceived as wrong or too much and ending up in social isolation? Like, is there pain and fear there that are worth exploring for you so that you're not hit with that red flag in your child's experience? Can you look for your child or be with where they're feeling disempowered or overpowered in their own life and experience, and how you can balance that out? Can you create a yes day really consciously with them? We also do, my kids before lockdown, we would do jailbreak days. So once a term, we literally just bust all of the rules and we'd break out for a day that they totally designed, which is like having a yes day. So just being able to find more outlets of yes rather than all of the no's can be incredibly equilibrating. Recognizing that this is just the next level of needing social skills, body regulation skills, holding of self in a space that feels really grounded and connected. So recognizing that under the meanness is anxiety and difficulty in being in intimacy with other humans and being in awkwardness within that intimacy. So coming from where that is within ourselves and meeting them from, I really get it. What I've tried there is, what we could try there might be. What ideas do you have? Beautiful. What are other ways that we can create a pause? So how can I put my hand out while I create a pause and I breathe, or I create a pause while I think? Can we offer not this, but then that? Or is it a really big no for us? In which case, then that's okay, is to say, I just don't want to, Jake. And that we're having those conversations with the teachers and the school, and that we're all facilitating together how to make this the best experience for all of the kids that are involved, rather than anyone feeling like they're on their own. So would you add anything else to that sum up, Bridge?
No, I love that. I think you've kind of covered it there. But I think ultimately, I mean, the big teacher here is like, how can I lean into the awkwardness that is there for me? Because, and I love that you say this often, Julie, you know, the more awkward conversations you have, the less awkward conversations you have, because you become literate in the awkwardness and in being in it, and in making safe your body in that discomfort.
Totally. And I think that being able to be in relationship whilst not sharing sameness is the greatest relational toolkit that we can give our kids. But we have to recognize that is learned every year and continues to be learned even as adults.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, look, I still come back to family being the greatest teacher of that too, because we get to practice that most effectively with people we disagree with. You know, can I still be in connection with you and love you when we disagree? Or when we see things totally different? Or do all my fight and flight, you know, behaviors come up in order to protect myself? How much can I be with the discomfort here and the awkwardness here and stay in relationship?
Totally.
That's like ninja work. But if we can continue to do that, then we come up with more effective tools of communication and more capacity to be in different relationships and with people very different to ourselves and still be respectful, which is what we want for our children.
Definitely, it's what we want for our kids. So we're also in the show notes, we're going to include a list of about 8 other podcasts from our podcast, Nourishing the Mother, or episodes, I should say, that relate or might talk around and give you more tools on this particular topic. So please look in the show notes if you wish to explore this further around how you're holding these tension points in your children's development and reflection of self in all of the awkward creation of finding our own boundaries in a regulated and connected way. So we will include that resource in the show notes.
We will. And to connect with you, Julie?
Is julietenner.love, and to connect to you, Bridge?
bridgetwood.life. Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.